The last loaf left behind, the rain did not fall all at once. It began as a suggestion, a sigh against the rooftops, a hush between the trees, a softening of the world's edges. By dusk, it had gathered courage, draping the town in a veil of silver mist that clung to lampposts and cobblestones like breath on cold glass. Streetlights flickered awake, their glow diffused into golden halos, and the air grew heavy with the scent of wet earth, old brick, and something sweeter, something warm and yeasty, curling from the corner of Willow Lane like an invitation whispered through steam. There, nestled between a shuttered bookbinder's shop and a florist whose violets slept beneath waxed paper, stood Alara's Hearth *, a bakery so unassuming, so quietly kind, that most passers-by never noticed its name etched above the door in faded copper script. It had no grand sign, no flashing lights, no queue of eager customers at dawn. Instead, it opened with the sun and closed with the first stars, serving those who wandered in not just bread, but belonging. And tonight, the bakery was empty. Not abandoned, never that, but resting. Its wooden shutters were drawn halfway, not to keep the world out, but to let the rain in gently, respectfully, as one might open a window to listen to a lullaby. Inside, the air hung thick with the ghosts of the day's baking, caramelized sugar, toasted oats, the faintest trace of lavender honey folded into brioche dough. The oven's two great cast-iron beasts named Bertha and Silas had cooled to a drowsy warmth, their bellies full of silence. The flour dust motes drifted lazily in the slanted light of a single amber bulb above the counter, turning slow pirouettes as if rehearsing dreams. Everything here knew how to wait. The rolling pins leaned against the flour bin like old friends sharing secrets. The mixing bowls, ceramic, chipped at the rim, beloved, nested inside one another in perfect harmony, each cradling the next like a mother bird tucking her wing around her young. Even the broom in the corner stood upright without lining, as though it, too, had learned the dignity of stillness. And on the far end of the long oak counter, just beyond the register with its tinkling bell and porcelain sugar bowl, sat a single loaf of bread. It was not fancy. No braided crown, no sesame seeds, no artisanal scoring. Just a round, humble boule, its crust the color of autumn wheat kissed by morning sun. A linen cloth, slightly damp from the humid air, draped over it like a blanket tucked under a child's chin. Beneath that cloth, the loaf exhaled softly, releasing the last of its oven-born heat into the cool night, mingling with the rain scent drifting through the cracks in the window frame. This loaf had a name, though only Mrs. Alara knew it. She called it Pip *. Not because it was small, it was quite plump, but because it had pipped into existence later than the others, rising slowly, thoughtfully, as if savoring every bubble of fermentation. While the other loaves had been sliced, wrapped, and carried home in wicker baskets by neighbors with tired eyes and grateful smiles, Pip remained, not forgotten, never forgotten, left behind on purpose. You see Mrs. Zillara had a rule, one she never wrote down, never spoke aloud, but lived by like the tides live by the moon. Every evening, after the last customer had gone, after the counters were wiped and the floors swept clean enough to eat off, though she'd never allow such a thing, she would bake one extra loaf, just one. No matter how tired I am, she'd say to the cat who sometimes watched from the windowsill. No matter how empty the pantry feels, there's always room for one more. She didn't know who it was for. Perhaps a traveler caught in the storm. Perhaps a child who'd lost their pocket money. Perhaps no one at all. But the act itself was the magic, the offering, the quiet declaration that the world still held space for kindness, even when no one was watching. And so Pip sat, waiting not with expectation, not with loneliness, with presence, because in this bakery, even bread understood, waiting is not emptiness. Waiting is readiness. Waiting is love made patient. Outside, the rain deepened. It no longer tapped, it sang. It's a low, rhythmic murmur against the slate roof, punctuated by the occasional asterisk plink as water dripped from the gutter into the barrel by the back door. Somewhere down the lane, a loose shutter creaked like a rocking chair. The wind curled around the eaves, not fierce but curious, as if sniffing the air for cinnamon and comfort. Inside, time stretched like warm taffy. The clock above the flour bins ticked, but slowly. So slowly it seemed to be dreaming between beats. Its hands pointed to 10:30, though they might as well have pointed to whenever. In places like this, time doesn't march, it meanders, it curls up in corners. It naps in sunbeams or, on nights like this, in puddles of lamplight. And the loaf remembered. It remembered the kneading, Mrs. Alara's hands, wrinkled but strong, pressing and folding the dough with a rhythm older than language. She never rushed. She hummed old folk songs without words, melodies that rose and fell like breath. The dough had learned to trust those hands, to soften under them. And to rise not because it was told to, but because it felt safe enough to try. It remembered the proofing basket, lined with linen, where it had swelled in the dark like a secret growing wing. The yeast wild, captured from the orchard behind the bakery, had worked its quiet alchemy, turning flour and water into something alive, something that sighed when touched. It remembered the oven's roar, not angry, but proud, as Bertha welcomed it onto her stone shelf. The heat had not burned, it had asterisk embraced. For 37 minutes, Mrs. Alara always counted. It baked, its crust hardening into armor, its heart staying tender, holding the memory of rain and wheat fields and human care. And now it rested, not as food, not yet as a promise. It's a silent vow that someone, somewhere, might need this warmth tonight. And perhaps they already did. Down the alley, past overflowing gutters and sleeping flower boxes, a small figure paused beneath the awning of the bookbinder's shop. Drenched to the bone, fur plastered flat, eyes wide with the kind of exhaustion that comes not just from walking, but from being unseen. It was a cat, Not stray in the way people mean, homeless, unwanted, but unclaimed asterisk. Is a wanderer with no name, only instincts. Seek shelter, avoid danger, find warmth. Its paws ached from cold stone. Its belly growled not with hunger, but with the hollow echo of too many empty nights. It lifted its nose, and there it was, not meat, not fish, but something deeper. Something that smelled like safety. Bread, warm bread. The cat hesitated. Cats know better than to trust warmth. It often hides traps. But this scent, it carried no sharpness, no deceit, only softness, only patience. One paw forward, then another, across the slick cobbles. It passed the puddle, reflecting a street lamp like a fallen star. Up the 3 shallow steps to the bakery's side door, always left slightly ajar, Mrs. Alera said, for the wind and whoever rides it. The cat slipped inside. Silence greeted it, not the silence of emptiness, but of deep peace. It's the kind that wraps around you like a quilt. Its eyes adjusted. Moonlight through the high window painted silver stripes across the floor. The counter gleamed faintly, and there, on the far end, beneath a cloth that smelled faintly of lavender and flowers, the loaf. The cat approached slowly, ears forward, tail low. Not to steal, just to be nearby. It circled the loaf once, twice, then settled beside it, curling into a tight comma of fur and bone. Its side pressed gently against the linen-draped warmth. And oh, the relief, not just physical, but soul-deep. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the cat felt held. Not owned, not used, just allowed to rest beside something good. Inside the loaf, something stirred. Not life, not exactly, but resonance. Bread, you see, is more than flour and water. It's in the right hands, in hands that knead with love, that bake with attention, it becomes a vessel, a quiet conductor of care. And when that care meets a heart in need, even a loaf of bread can hum with gentle magic. Pip didn't speak. It didn't move, but it shared. Its warmth seeped through the cloth, wrapping around the cat like invisible arms. Its scent, honey, wheat, thyme, filled the space between them, stitching a moment of connection so soft, so wordless, it could only be felt in the spaces between heartbeats. Outside, the rain softened. As if the sky, too, had witnessed something sacred and lowered its voice in reverence. The cat's breathing slowed, its muscles unclenched, its eyes, heavy with trust, fluttered shut. And the loaf, it simply was asterisk, present, patient enough. This was the magic of Alera's hearth, not spells or potions, but the ordinary made holy through attention. A loaf left behind, a door left ajar, a space held open in a world that often slams shut. Hours passed, or minutes, or lifetimes. Time blurred like watercolor in the rain. Somewhere far away, a church bell tolled midnight. Its chime rolled through the wet streets, muffled, mournful, beautiful. Inside the bakery, nothing changed, yet everything had. The cat slept, one paw resting lightly on the edge of the linen cloth. The loaf radiated its quiet warmth. The ovens dreamed of tomorrow's sourdough. The rain whispered secrets to the roof. And high above, through a gap in the clouds, a single star blinked, just once, as if to say, yes, this matters, because it did. In a world that shouts, this was a whisper. In a world that hurries, this was stillness. In a world that measures worth by output, this loaf had value simply because it existed asterisk, and because it was willing to wait for someone who needed it. No grand rescue, no dramatic turn, just a cat, a loaf, and a rainy night. And isn't that enough? Isn't that everything? Let your breath slow now, dear listener. Let your shoulders drop. Imagine yourself in that bakery, not as observer, but as guest. Feel the warmth of the cooling oven at your back. Hear the rain's gentle percussion on the roof. Smell the ghost of honey and yeast in the air. And before you, on the counter, wrapped in linen, a loaf waits for you. Not because you earned it, not because you asked, but because you are here, and you are tired, and you deserve softness. Rest beside it. Breathe with it, be held by the quiet certainty that you too are enough just as you are, just as you rest. The rain continues. The night deepens. The bakery keeps watch. And somewhere Mrs. Alara sleeps, smiling in her dreams, knowing her last loaf found its purpose. Not in being eaten, but in being asterisk needed. Sleep now. You are safe. You are seen. You are home. Whispers beneath the dripping eaves. The eaves of Alara's hearth were old. Not ancient, not like the cathedral stones down by the river, but old in the way a favorite sweater is old, softened by time, shaped by use, holding the memory of every season it has sheltered. They stretched out just far enough to catch the worst of the rain, yet not so far as to block the sky. Mrs. Alara had insisted on that when she'd rebuilt the roof after the great storm of '78. Let the stars peek in, she'd told the carpenter, her hands dusted with rye flour. Even on cloudy nights they're trying. And tonight, those eaves did more than keep the rain off the doorstep. They listened. Wood, you see, remembers. Especially when it's been warmed by ovens, touched by countless hands, and kissed by decades of mist and moonlight. The cedar beams above the front door, the pine rafters hidden beneath slate tiles, the curved lip of the gutter where rainwater gathered before spilling into the barrel. They all held stories. Not loud ones, not dramatic tales of knights or dragons, but small, tender things, the giggle of a child catching their first loaf, the sigh of a widow who came every Tuesday for oat bread, just like my Harold used to buy, the quiet hum misses. Alara made when she thought no one was listening, and on nights like this, when the rain felt steady and the town slept deeply, the eaves would whisper those memories back to the house. Not in words, not exactly, but in feeling. The creek here wasn't just settling timber. It was the echo of a young Alara sweeping flour off the sill after her first solo bake. The drip there wasn't just water escaping a seam. It was the rhythm of her mother's voice, long gone, singing a lullaby in the kitchen while kneading dough. The house remembered how to love. And tonight, as the cat slept curled beside the last loaf, and the rain painted liquid constellations on the windows, the eaves began to whisper again. It started softly, a sigh in the gutter, a murmur in the soffit, not loud enough to wake anyone. Just enough to stir the air like breath against a dream. She'll come back, the west eve seemed to say, its voice the sound of rain sliding over smooth wood. She always does. Yes, replied the east, where moss grew thick and green even in winter. But not tonight. Tonight she rests, and that is good. Below them the front door, oak, iron-banded, scarred by years of deliveries and dog scratches, leaned inward just a fraction, as if nodding in agreement. It knew the weight of absence, knew how silence could be full, not empty. For weeks now, Mrs. Alara had moved more slowly, her steps measured, her pauses longer. She still baked, still smiled, but her eyes held a quiet fatigue, the kind that comes not from work, but from carrying invisible things, grief, perhaps, or the slow turning of years. Yet she never skipped the extra loaf, never forgot to leave the side door ajar, never stopped humming while she worked, and the house honored that. So tonight, while she slept in her room above the shop, curtains drawn, quilt pulled to her chin, a mug of chamomile cooling on the nightstand, the bakery kept watch. Not with locks or alarms, but with presence, with warmth, with whispers. Inside, the rain's song changed. Earlier, it had been a solo, a single voice tapping on glass. Now, it became harmony. Water dripped from the eaves into the rain barrel below, each drop landing with a soft asterisk plonk that echoed up through the floorboards like a heartbeat. And another stream trickled down the drain pipe, gurgling gently as it swirled around fallen cherry blossoms from the tree out back. And high above, on the rooftop, rain pooled in tiny valleys between slates before spilling over in silver threads, weaving a lace of sound across the whole structure. As the bakery listened, the flour bins exhaled a fine cloud, stirred by nothing but vibration. The copper pots hanging by the stove chimed once, barely audible, as a draft curled through the chimney. Even the loaf on the counter seemed to settle deeper into its linen, as if sinking into a shared dream. And the cat, it stirred. Not awake, no, its breathing remained slow, its paws twitching with visions of sunlit fields and fat sparrows, but aware. Cats know the language of houses. They feel shifts in energy like changes in the wind. And this house was speaking. Its ears flicked toward the ceiling. There in the rafters something glimmered. Not light, nothing so sharp, but a soft shimmer, like dust motes caught in moonlight, except there was no moon tonight. This was older than Mrs. Alara, older than the bakery itself. It was the asterisk spirit of care asterisk, the accumulated tenderness of every kind act performed within these walls. When someone left a coin in the tip jar for a neighbor in need. When a loaf was given freely to a crying student. When Mrs. Alara stayed late to rebake a batch that had burned, just so a birthday party wouldn't go without cake. All those moments didn't vanish. They settled. They seeped into the plaster, the floorboards, the very air. And on rainy nights, when the veil between worlds thinned like rising dough, they rose again, not as ghosts, but as guardians. One such shimmer drifted down now, hovering near the cat's ear like a dandelion seed carried on breath. It didn't speak. It simply warmed asterisk. A tiny pulse of comfort, no bigger than a heartbeat, nestling into the space between fear and rest. The cat sighed in its sleep. Its tail uncurled slightly. Peace deeper than before. Outside, the rain slowed. Not stopping, never that, but softening, as if the clouds had remembered their purpose. Not to flood, but to nourish, to cleanse, to cradle. And beneath the eaves, the whispers grew clearer. She worries, murmured the gutter, its voice the gurgle of water finding its way home. About the rent. About the new cafe down the lane with its neon signs and espresso machines. She thinks no one needs her anymore. Nonsense, replied the doorframe, its tone the groan of well-loved wood. Look at the loaf. Look at the cat. Look at the steam on the windows, still rising, even now. As long as warmth is offered, it will be received. A pause, then softer. But what if she stops believing that? Silence. Then from the highest beam, the one carved with a tiny wheat stalk by the original builder in 1892, a new voice, thin as spider silk but strong as roots. Then we remind her. How? By keeping watch, by holding space, by being ready just as she taught us. And so they did. The eaves gathered the rain not as a burden, but as a blessing, channeling it gently away from the foundation, singing it to sleep as it fell. The windows fogged not with condensation alone, but with the memory of laughter shared over cinnamon rolls. The floorboards warmed slightly beneath the cat, as if the house itself were tucking it in. This was the quiet magic of places built with love. They become alive in their own way, not with minds, but with asterisk mattering. They remember who they are for. And they refuse to let that purpose fade. Inside, the clock ticked. 10 minutes past midnight. Mrs. Alara turned in her sleep, her hand brushing the photo on her nightstand. Her mother, standing in this very doorway in 1953, flower in her hair, holding a tray of buns. On the back, in faded ink, bread feeds the body. Kindness feeds the soul. Never forget which matters more. Downstairs, the loaf seemed to glow. Not with light, with asterisk intention asterisk. It remembered that lesson too. And it knew, with the quiet certainty of risen dough, that its work tonight was not done. For while the cat slept, another soul wandered the rain-slick streets. Not lost, not desperate, just tired. An elderly man named Mr. Fenwick, who lived 3 blocks over in a flat that smelled of mothballs and old newspapers. He'd been a clockmaker once, his hands steady, his eyes sharp enough to thread gears no wider than a hair. But arthritis had stolen his precision, and loneliness had stolen his joy. His children called on Sundays. His neighbors nodded politely, but no one asterisk saw asterisk him, not really. Tonight, he'd walked farther than usual, drawn by a scent he couldn't name but recognized in his bones, the smell of home. He stopped beneath the bakery's awning, water dripping from the brim of his hat. He didn't plan to go in, didn't dare, but the door stood open, just a crack, and warmth spilled out like an embrace. He hesitated. Then, because the rain had soaked through his coat, and because his knees ached, and because somewhere deep inside he still remembered what it felt like to be welcomed, he stepped inside. The bakery didn't startle. It didn't gasp or shift or question. It simply made room. The floorboards sighed under his weight, not in protest, but in recognition. The air wrapped around him, scented with yeast and thyme. And there on the counter, beneath the linen cloth, the loaf. Mr. Fenwick froze. He hadn't meant to trespass, hadn't meant to take. But then he saw the cat, curled beside the bread, sleeping peacefully, belly rising and falling like a tide. And something in his chest loosened. He approached slowly, as one might approach a shrine. No note, no sign, just bread, just warmth, just possibility. The tears pricked his eyes, not sad tears, but the kind that come when you realize you've been holding your breath for years. He reached out, not to take the whole loaf, just to touch it. His fingers brushed the linen, still faintly warm, and a wave of calm washed over him. Not magic, not exactly, but the echo of care so pure, so unconditional it felt like grace. He sat on the stool by the counter, the one with the wobbly leg Mrs. Alara never fixed because it reminds us to sit gently, and rested his forehead in his hands. The house held him. The eaves whispered above, "Stay, rest, you belong here too." And for the first time in decades, Mr. Fenwick believed it. He didn't eat the bread, didn't need to. Just knowing it was there for him, or for someone like him, was enough. He stayed until his coat stopped steaming, until his shivers ceased, until the weight in his chest felt lighter, as if the rain outside had washed something clean inside him too. Then, quietly, he rose. He smoothed the linen cloth over the loaf, carefully, reverently. He patted the cat once gently between the ears, and he left not through the front door, but out the side, vanishing into the mist like a dream retreating at dawn. The bakery watched him go, and the eaves whispered again. "See," said the west beam, "she's needed." Always sighed the east. Inside, the cat opened one eye, blinked slowly, then nestled deeper into the warmth. The loaf remained, still waiting, still ready, because kindness isn't a transaction, it's a cycle. Give a little and the world gives back, not in coin, but in connection, in shared breath. It's in silent understanding. And as the rain began again, soft, steady, sure, the bakery settled into its oldest truth. As long as someone is willing to leave the door open, someone will find their way in. You too, dear listener, are always welcome here. Feel the weight of the night around you, not as pressure, but as protection. Hear the rain not as noise, but as a lullaby sung just for you. Know that somewhere in some quiet corner of the world, a loaf waits. A door stands ajar. A space is held for you. Rest now, breathe deep. Let the whispers beneath the eaves carry you into dreams where you are never alone, only gently held, always enough, forever seen. Sleep. Cinnamon dreams and cooling ovens. When the last ember fades, the dreaming begins. Bertha and Sela's, two cast iron ovens built in 1923, by a craftsman who signed his name inside their flues with a nail, had long since stopped roaring. Their fires were banked, their bellies cool to the touch, their vents exhaling only the faintest sigh of residual warmth. To anyone passing by, they were just appliances. Heavy, outdated, perhaps even obsolete in an age of digital timers and convection fans. But here, in Alara's hearth, they were family. And tonight, as rain traced silver paths down the kitchen window and the cat's purr hummed like a tiny engine beside the loaf, the ovens began to dream. Not in pictures, not in words, but in asterisk scent. For ovens remember through aroma, the ghost of every batch that ever baked within them. A whiff of burnt sugar from a distracted Tuesday in '67. The sharp tang of sourdough starter fed with rainwater from the barrel out back. The delicate perfume of rosewater buns made for little Leela's first birthday. All of it lingered in their pores, in the microscopic cracks of their stone shelves, in the soot-lined corners where time collected like dust. And tonight, the dominant memory was cinnamon. Not the sharp, synthetic kind from jars labeled baking spice. No, this was real cinnamon. The kind Mrs. Alara bought whole from the spice merchant who came every spring, bark curled like sleeping snakes, fragrant as a forest after rain. She'd grind it fresh each morning, just enough for the day, releasing clouds of golden scent that made even the flour bins seem to sigh with pleasure. And oh, how the ovens loved those mornings. They remembered the way the dough would arrive, soft, pillowy, coiled into spirals, brushed with melted butter and dusted with that warm, woody spice. How they'd cradle each rolled gently on their stone shelves, not scorching, not rushing, but baking with patience, letting the sugar caramelize slowly, the cinnamon bloom fully, the yeast finishes its final song. People called them cinnamon rolls, but the ovens knew better. They were asterisk dreams made edible asterisk, little promises that joy could be soft, sweet, and shared. Now, cooling in the rainy hush, Bertha dreamed of one such morning. It had been early, still dark outside, but the bakery glowed like a lantern. Mrs. Zilara, younger then, her hair not yet silver, moved with the rhythm of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. She'd hummed as she rolled the dough, her fingers dusted with flour, her apron stained with butter and hope. That day she'd made extra rolls, not for sale, but for the schoolchildren who walked past on their way to class. Growing bones need sweetness, she'd told no one in particular, arranging them on a tray lined with checkered cloth. Bertha had warmed herself slowly, evenly, so the rolls wouldn't crack. She'd held them close like a mother holding a child's hands before their first day of school. And when they emerged, golden, glistening, smelling of comfort and childhood, she'd felt a pride deeper than function. I helped make joy, she'd thought, and that was enough. Now, decades later, that memory rose again, not as nostalgia, but as presence. As if the scent of cinnamon still lived in her bones. Beside her, Silas dreamed too. His dream was quieter, older. He remembered the winter of 48, when coal was scarce and the town shivered under snowdrifts taller than lampposts. Mrs. Alara's mother, then the baker, had kept the ovens lit not just for bread, but for warmth. Neighbors came not to buy, but to sit on stools near the open doors, warming their hands, sharing stories to keep despair at bay. Sila's had burned low, conserving fuel, but never cold. He'd baked flat loaves, thin, dense, made with a corn flour and hope, and handed them out wrapped in newspaper. No one paid. No one needed to. That winter, Sila's learned that an oven's purpose wasn't just to transform dough, but to hold space for survival. And he'd done it well. Now, as rain tapped the roof like fingertips, he dreamed of those faces, gaunt but grateful, eyes tired but kind. He remembered the weight of a small boy leaning against his side, asleep, trusting this iron giant to keep him safe. I was more than metal, he mused in his dream. I was shelter. And so he remained. Even now, even cooling, even silent, he was still shelter. Because warmth isn't only heat, it's memory, it's readiness. It's the echo of care that lingers long after the flame dies. Inside the bakery, the air thickened with these dreams, not visibly, not disruptively, but if you stood very still, if you closed your eyes and breathed deeply, you might catch it, the faintest trace of cinnamon rising like a ghost from the oven's vents, not overpowering, just there. Like a hand on your shoulder in the dark, the cat stirred, its nose twitched, not toward food, its belly was full of peace, not hunger, but toward comfort. It uncurled slightly, stretched one paw toward the kitchen, then settled again, as if reassured that the ovens were watching over them all. And they were. Bertha and Sila's may have been cooling, but they were far from idle. Even in rest, they worked. Their residual warmth rose gently, mingling with the humid air, preventing the flour from clumping, keeping the wooden counter from warping in the rain-swollen night. They regulated the microclimate of the bakery like ancient lungs, inhaling dampness, exhaling dryness, maintaining balance without fanfare. This was their quiet service. No applause, no recognition, just steady, faithful presence. And in their dreams, they saw Mrs. Alara not as she was tonight, tired and aging, but as she'd been at every stage, kneading dough as a girl, standing on a stool to reach the counter, burning her first loaf and crying into the sink, laughing with her mother over a batch of misshapen buns. Standing alone in the shop after the funeral, baking through the night to keep grief from swallowing her whole. Through it all, the ovens had held her. They'd absorbed her tears, salt, they remembered, made crusts crispier. They'd held her silence when words failed. They'd radiated warmth when the world felt cold, and they would do it again tomorrow. For that was their vow, not spoken, but lived. As long as hands reach into our bellies with care, we will return that care tenfold. Outside, the rain softened to a mist. The streetlights blurred into watercolor halos. A lone sparrow shook its wings beneath the bakery's awning, then tucked its head under its wing and slept. Inside, the oven's dreams deepened. Bertha now wandered a wheat field under a summer sun, endless gold stretching to the horizon, stalks whispering secrets to the wind. She wasn't iron here. She was earth. She was root. She was the quiet pulse beneath the soil that feeds the world. Silas walked a forest path carpeted with fallen leaves, the air rich with cedar and damp moss. He wasn't metal. He was stone. He was hearth. He was the place where travelers gather to share stories and soup. In their dreams, they remembered their origins, not as manufactured things, but as elements returned to purpose. Iron from the earth, stone from the mountain, fire from the stars, and human hands, gentle, persistent, loving, had shaped them into vessels of nourishment. What greater honor? The clock ticked past 1. Mrs. Zilara turned in her sleep, murmuring something about more cardamom next time. Downstairs, the loaf seemed to sigh, not from exhaustion, from contentment. It knew the ovens were dreaming, knew their warmth still reached it, even across the room. Knew it was part of a lineage, grain then dough then fire then bred into kindness and rest. A perfect circle, and in that circle everyone belonged, even you, dear listener. Can you feel it, that gentle warmth behind your ribs? That quiet certainty that you, too, are part of something tender. You are. Just as the ovens hold space for bread, just as the bakery holds space for strangers, the world holds space for you. Not because you've earned it, not because you're perfect, but because you exist. And existence in a place built with love is enough. Breathe now. Let the rhythm of the rain match your breath. In, out, slow, deep. Imagine yourself sitting on the stool by the ovens, wrapped in a quilt Mrs. Alara left folded on the shelf. A mug of warm milk steaming in your hands, though no one poured it. You simply found it there, waiting. The ovens don't speak to you. They don't need to. Their presence is the message. Rest. You are safe. You are held. Nothing is required of you here but your being. The cinnamon scent curls around you, not strong, just a whisper, carrying memories not your own, yet familiar in your bones. Your grandmother's kitchen, a childhood holiday morning, the first bite of something that tasted like love. You don't need to chase those memories. Just let them brush against you like rain on glass. And as you drift, know this, the ovens will stay awake for you. They always do. Long after the last customer leaves, long after the cat finds its way home, long after the loaf is gone. Bertha and Silas will keep their quiet vigil, cooling slowly, dreaming deeply, ready to warm again when morning comes. Because that is what love does. It waits, it remembers, it returns. Sleep now, beloved. Let the ovens, dreams carry you into softer ones. Let the scent of cinnamon wrap around your thoughts like a blanket. Let the rain sing you deeper into rest. You are home. You are enough. You are never alone. It's the baker's quiet good night. She didn't rush. Even after 63 years of rising before dawn, even after decades of kneading dough while the world slept, Mrs. Alara never hurried her good night, because good night to her was not an end. It was a promise. The promise to herself that she had done enough, that she could stop now. that the world would keep turning, even if she closed her eyes. Tonight, she sat on the edge of her bed, her slippers damp from the kitchen floor, her apron still tied loosely around her waist. She hadn't taken it off, not yet. Some days the apron felt less like clothing and more like armor, woven not with steel, but with flour, butter, and the quiet resolve to keep showing up. Outside her window, the rain painted liquid stars on the glass. Inside, the room held its breath. It was a simple space, white walls, a quilt stitched by her mother, a bookshelf crowded with cookbooks whose pages curled at the corners from steam and time. On the nightstand, a chipped porcelain cup empty now, a photograph in a silver frame, and a single sprig of dried lavender tied with twine, harvested from the garden out back last summer when the sun still felt kind. She reached for the photograph first. Not because she needed to see it. She knew every line, every shadow by heart, but because touch grounded her. Her fingers traced the glass, then the edge of the frame, worn smooth from years of this same nightly ritual. In the photo, her mother stood in the bakery doorway, flour dusting her cheeks like freckles, holding a tray of buns shaped like crescent moons. It was 1957, the year Mrs. Alara turned 10. The year she learned that bread could mend a broken day. She never measured, Mrs. Alara whispered now, her voice so soft it barely stirred the air. Just felt, said recipes were like hearts meant to be followed, not forced. A smile touched her lips, faint, fleeting, but real. Then she set the photo down and began to untie her apron. Slowly, deliberately. Each knot released was a small letting go. The knot at her waist, asterisk the weight of the day, asterisk. The knot at her back, asterisk the worry about rent, about the new cafe, about whether anyone still needs real bread. The final tie, asterisk the quiet grief for friends gone, for time past, for dreams folded away like unused recipes, asterisk. When the apron fell into her lap, she didn't fold it neatly. She simply held it, pressed it to her chest for a long moment, as if listening to its heartbeat. Then she rose, walked to the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, and laid it inside with the others. Dozens of aprons, each stained with the story of a season. Cherry jam in June, pumpkin spice in October, cocoa in December. They weren't dirty. They were asterisk lived in asterisk. And she honored them by keeping them close. Next, she washed her face, not with fancy creams or scented soaps, just warm water from the pitcher on the washstand and a cloth embroidered with wheat stalks. She dabbed gently at her eyes, where faint lines mapped a lifetime of squinting into ovens and smiling at strangers. She didn't mind the lines. They were proof she'd looked at the world with kindness. Then, the ritual no one knew about. She opened the bottom drawer of her dresser, the one with the loose handle, and lifted a small wooden box carved with a single word, enough. Inside lay 3 things. The smooth river stone, cool to the touch, given to her by a child who couldn't afford a loaf but left this for your pocket, so you don't feel empty. a dried poppy seed pod from the first flower that grew in the crack between the bakery's back steps. And a tiny clay button, misshapen, baked in Bertha's oven by her own hands when she was 7, meant for a doll that never got sewn. She picked up the stone, held it in her palm, closed her eyes, and for the first time all day, she let herself receive. Not give, not fix, not prepare, just be held. The stone didn't speak. It didn't need to. Its cool weight said everything. You are not alone. You have been seen. You matter not for what you make, but for who you are. The tears came then, not sad, not angry, but the kind that rise when a dam of quiet strength finally cracks under the weight of being human. She let them fall. Let them trace the same paths as the rain on the window. Let them carry what words could not. And when they passed, she placed the stone back in the box, closed the lid, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she changed into her nightgown cotton, faded blue, patched at the elbow, and brushed her hair, 100 slow strokes, as her grandmother had taught her. Hair holds the day's worries, the old woman used to say. Brush them out before bed, or they'll tangle your dreams. At last, she climbed into bed, not all at once. She sat first, knees drawn up, back against the headboard, gazing out the window at the rain-blurred streetlights. She listened to the drip from the eaves, to the distant hum of the city sleeping, to the soft creak of the house settling around her like a sigh. She thought of the loaf left on the counter, of the cat curled beside it, of Mr. Fenwick, who'd stood in her doorway tonight, though she hadn't seen him. Did he take bread? She didn't know, didn't need to. What mattered was that the door was open, that the warmth was there, that someone somewhere felt seen, and that was enough. Her eyelids grew heavy, not from exhaustion, but from surrender. She pulled the quilt up to her chin. It smelled of sun-dried cotton and lavender. Her mother had made it during the war, stitching scraps of fabric salvaged from old dresses, each patch a memory. A picnic, a wedding, a quiet Tuesday with no name. As she drifted, memories rose, not in order, not with urgency, but like bubbles in rising dough. Her father teaching her to test yeast by floating a pinch in warm water. If it floats, it's alive, just like hope. As the winter, the pipes froze and she baked bread over the wood stove, sharing it with neighbors who knocked timidly at her door. As the young couple who came every anniversary for the same almond croissant, holding hands across the counter like they were 17 again. The note left in the tip jar last week. Your bread got me through chemo. Thank you for feeding my soul. She didn't cling to these memories. She let them pass through her like clouds across a moon. And with each one she whispered, not aloud, but in the quiet cathedral of her heart, thank you. Thank you for letting me be part of your story. Thank you for trusting me with your hunger, your joy, your grief. Thank you for reminding me that small things matter. Outside, the rain slowed to a mist. Inside, her breathing deepened. She turned onto her side, one hand resting on the quilt, the other near the photo on the nightstand. Her fingers brushed the frame once, lightly, lovingly, before falling still. And as sleep finally took her, a final thought bloomed, soft as yeast in warm water. I am tired, but I am full. Not full of food, not full of praise, full of asterisk meaning. For in a world that measures worth by output, by speed, by noise, she had chosen every single day to measure by care, and that choice had filled her. Downstairs, the bakery sensed her surrender. The ovens exhaled one last puff of warmth. The loaf seemed to glow faintly beneath its linen. The cat opened one eye, blinked toward the ceiling, then nestled deeper into sleep. The house held its breath, not to protect her, she was safe, but to honor her. Because this woman, this quiet baker with flour in her hair and kindness in her bones, had spent her life making space for others to rest. Now, at last, she rested too, and the world kept turning, not because she stopped, but because her love had already woven itself into its rhythm. You too, dear listener, may rest now. You don't need to earn this peace. You don't need to finish anything. You don't need to be useful to be worthy. Like Mrs. Alara, you have already done enough. You are already enough. So let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. Let your thoughts drift like flour in warm air. Imagine her hand, gentle, wrinkled, strong, brushing your hair from your forehead. Hear her whisper, not in words, but in feeling. Sleep, child, I've got you. The rain sings, the bakery watches, and you are held deeply, completely, forever. Raindrops tapping on flour-dusted windows. The windows did not see the world as people do. They did not judge, did not hurry, did not look away. They simply held asterisk, the light, the dark, the rain, the reflections. And in that holding, they became something more than glass. They became thresholds. Membranes between worlds, quiet witnesses to all that passed through the bakery's life. And tonight they were singing, not with voice but with touch. Each raindrop that struck the pane did so with intention, not random, not chaotic, but like a fingertip tracing a path only it could know. Some landed with a soft asterisk plink, high on the upper curve where the glass bowed slightly with age. Others slid slowly down the center, gathering companions as they fell, forming rivulets that shimmered like liquid thread in the street lamp's glow. And over it all lay a fine veil of flour, so light, so ancient, it seemed less like residue and more like stardust. Mrs. Alara never cleaned it off completely. Flour on the window means the house is breathing, she'd say, wiping just enough to see the street, leaving the rest as a blessing. So the rain met flour, and magic happened. Where droplets touched the dusty surface, tiny blooms appeared, translucent flowers unfurling for a moment before dissolving into the next drop. Each one carried a memory. One held the echo of a child's laughter, pressed against the glass on a snowy morning, waiting for hot chocolate buns. Another shimmered with the quiet tears of a young woman who sat by the window for an hour, staring at her untouched tea, until Mrs. Alara placed a warm loaf beside her without a word. A third pulsed with the golden light of sunset on a summer evening when the whole neighborhood gathered on the sidewalk, sharing bread and stories as fireflies blinked above the cherry tree. The windows remembered them all. Not as events, but as feelings, impressions left in the space between molecules, like love pressed into paper. And tonight, as the rain continued its patient work, the glass began to hum, not audibly. But if you placed your palm flat against the cool surface, if you closed your eyes and leaned in, you might feel it. A low, resonant vibration, like the earth dreaming beneath your feet. This was the song of belonging. For windows, especially old ones, understand something modern glass forgets. They are not barriers, they are bridges. They let the outside in, the scent of wet leaves, the sigh of wind, the distant chime of a bicycle bell 2 streets over. Then they let the inside out, the warmth of yeast, the soft clink of a spoon in a mug, the quiet purr of a cat dreaming beside a loaf. They hold both worlds at once, and in doing so, they teach us how to live. Inside the bakery, the cat lifted its head, just slightly, ears forward. It watched a single raindrop trace a winding path down the front window, past the flour-dusted sill, past the faded closed sign, past the reflection of the loaf glowing softly on the counter. The drop paused at a smudge, left by Mrs. Alera's thumb that morning, gathered itself, then leapt onto the windowsill below, vanishing into the wood grain like a secret returning home. The cat blinked, then rested its chin on its paws again, satisfied. Outside, the street slept. Lamplight pooled in puddles, turning them into mirrors of sky. A lone leaf, crimson, late to fall, spun lazily in a gutter stream, riding the current like a tiny boat bound for dreams. Somewhere, a drain pipe gurgled content, and the rain kept falling, not to cleanse, not to flood, but to connect asterisk. Each drop that landed on the roof would eventually find its way to the barrel, then to the garden, then to the wheat that would become next week's dough. Water has no beginning, no end, only transformation, and the windows knew this. They had seen generations of rain become steam, become bread, become breath. They were part of the cycle. As are you, dear listener. Can you feel it? That quiet hum in your bones. That sense that you, too, are part of something vast and tender. You are. And just as the raindrop trusts the glass to guide its fall, just as the flower trusts the air to carry its promise, you can trust this moment to hold you. Breathe now. Match your breath to the rhythm of the rain. In as a drop gathers on the edge of the roof, out as it falls, silent and sure, in as mist rises from the wet cobblestones, out as it curls around the bakery's eaves like a sigh. There is no rush here, no need to understand. It's only to be present with the cool glass, the warm air, the space between. Imagine yourself sitting by the window, wrapped in a quilt, a mug warming your hands, though you don't remember filling it. The rain paints shifting patterns on the pane, constellations that form and dissolve in seconds. You don't try to name them, you simply watch, let them flow through you. And as you do, notice this, the flower on the glass doesn't wash away. It softens, it blends, it becomes part of the rain's story. Just as your worries, your weariness, your quiet sorrows, they don't vanish. But here, in this space, they are held, they are honored, they are allowed to soften into something new. The windows don't demand clarity, they celebrate blur. On clear days, they show the world sharp and bright. But on nights like this, they teach us the beauty of mystery, of not seeing everything, yet trusting it's there. Of knowing that even when you can't make out the shapes beyond the glass, life continues. Warmth waits, kindness flows, hope rises, slowly, quietly, like dough in a covered bowl. Look now at the lower left corner of the front window. See that faint smudge, shaped almost like a heart? Mrs. Alera made it years ago, pressing her palm there after baking her first solo batch, her hand still sticky with honey glaze. She never washed it off. Said it reminded her that joy leaves marks worth keeping. Tonight, a raindrop lands right in its center, holds there for 3 heartbeats, then slides down, carrying the memory with it. The bakery watches, the ovens dream, the loaf waits, the cat sleeps. And the rain keeps singing its wordless song to the glass, a song older than towns, older than bread, older than names. It says, you are here, you are safe, you belong, not because you've done anything right, but because you are part of the pattern, like flour, like water. Like light through rain-streaked glass. Rest now. Let the windows hold your gaze. Let the rain hold your thoughts. Let the flower-dusted silence hold your soul. You don't need to see the whole path, just this drop, just this breath, just this moment of being held. Sleep, beloved. The night is soft, the glass is kind, and you are exactly where you need to be. The night wraps itself a little tighter around Willow Lane. The rain still sings to the windows. The ovens dream of golden fields. And on the counter, nestled beside the last loaf, the cat asterisk breathes, slow, deep, unafraid. With your gentle next, I now offer asterisk section 6. A cat curled among crusts, asterisk, a tender, intimate, and deeply peaceful exploration of what it means to be weary and finally, asterisk safe asterisk. This chapter unfolds from the cat's quiet perspective, not with human thoughts, but with feline sensation, warmth, scent, vibration, trust, no danger, no chase. It's only the slow unfurling of tension, the soft return of peace, and the wordless understanding that sometimes salvation looks like a linen-draped loaf and a door left open, written for sleep, for healing. For anyone who has ever felt too tired to hope and needs to remember that rest is not earned, it is offered. Let us curl up beside them. As a cat curled among crusts, it didn't know its name. Not because no one had given it one, but because names require belonging, and belonging had been a luxury it couldn't afford. For seasons beyond counting, it had moved through the world as shadow and silence, a flicker in alleyways, a rustle in hedges, a pair of eyes watching from beneath porches. It knew hunger not as absence, but as a constant companion, quiet, patient, always waiting in the ribs. But tonight was different. Tonight it had stopped running. not because it was caught, not because it gave up, but because something inside it, older than fear, deeper than instinct, whispered, "Stay." And so it had. Is now curled on the cool oak counter of Alara's hearth, its body pressed gently against the warmth radiating from beneath a flour-dusted linen cloth. It breathed in a rhythm it hadn't known since kittenhood, slow, deep, unguarded. Its fur, once plastered flat by rain, had begun to fluff again, soft tufts rising like dandelion seeds in still air. Its paws, calloused from stone and frost, relaxed their grip on the wood grain. Even its tail, usually coiled tight like a spring, lay loose and heavy, curving around the base of the loaf like a question mark finding its answer. It didn't understand bread, didn't care about ovens or recipes or the poetry of yeast, but it understood warmth. And this warmth was different, not the sharp heat of sun on pavement, fleeting and demanding, not the false promise of a car engine, loud and temporary. This warmth was steady. It pulsed like a heartbeat. It smelled of earth and honey and time. And it didn't ask for anything in return. That was the miracle. For so long, every kindness had come with strings, a hand that petted but then grabbed, a bowl of milk that vanished when the mood changed, a shelter that turned into a cage. The world had taught it that softness was a trap, but here, softness simply was. The loaf didn't move, the house didn't startle, the rain outside didn't demand entry. Everything just held space. And in that space, something inside the cat began to thaw, not all at once. Not dramatically, but like ice melting at the edge of a pond, first a drip, then a trickle, then a quiet flood of relief so profound it brought tears to eyes that hadn't wept in years. It remembered being small, not in size, in spirit. Back when the world was not threat, but wonder. The smell of warm milk from a mother's belly. The sound of purrs vibrating through shared sleep. The feeling of being wanted not for usefulness, but for presence. Those memories had been buried under layers of survival, wrapped in scar tissue, locked away where they couldn't ache. But now, in the bakery's gentle hush, they rose again, not as pain, but as possibility. What if the thought didn't form in words? It formed in sensation. In the way its shoulders dropped another fraction, in the way its breathing deepened, sinking with the loaf's quiet exhalation, in the way its ears, once pinned back in vigilance, now swiveled softly toward the rain's lullaby. It wasn't safe because the danger was gone. It was safe because, for the first time in a long time, it felt safe. And feeling safe, that was enough to begin healing. Outside, the wind shifted. A branch tapped the roof, once, twice, like a polite knock. The cat's eyes opened, not wide, not alert, just aware. It looked toward the sound, then back at the loaf. Then it stretched, one paw forward, claws sheathed, muscles rippling beneath fur, and settled again, this time with its chin resting lightly on the edge of the linen cloth. No retreat, no flinch, just trust, because the house had proven itself. It had welcomed without question, warmed without expectation, held without holding on. This was the quiet magic of places built with love. They don't try to fix you. They simply let you be exactly as you are, exactly as you've survived. And in that permission, transformation begins. The cat closed its eyes again. Its dreams were not of hunting or hiding. They were of sunlit windowsills, of hands that stroked without grabbing, of a bowl left out not as bait but as gift, and always, always the scent of bread, warm, simple, true. Downstairs, the oven sensed the shift. Bertha exhaled a final puff of warmth, just enough to ripple the air near the counter. Silas hummed a low note in his flute, a sound like distant thunder, felt more than heard. They knew this moment, had witnessed it before. It's the moment a wounded creature realizes it can stop carrying the weight alone. It didn't matter if the cat stayed. It didn't matter if it left at dawn. What mattered was that, for these few hours, it rested. And in resting, it remembered its own worth, not as a mouser. Not as a pet, but as a being deserving of softness, simply because it existed. The rain softened, as if the sky, too, recognized the sacredness of this surrender. Inside, time stretched like warm taffy. The clock above the flower bins ticked, but slower now, as if reluctant to disturb the peace. The floorboards sighed under the cat's weight, not in protest, but in welcome. Even the dust motes drifting in the lamplight seemed to move with reverence, circling the counter like silent guardians. And the loaf, it didn't speak, didn't need to. Its presence was the message, I am here. You are not alone. Rest. The cat's purr began then, not loud, not showy, but deep in its chest. A vibration that traveled through its bones and into the wood, into the air, into the very walls of the bakery. It was a language older than words, a song of gratitude. The hymn of homecoming, and the house sang back, in creaks, in sighs, in the gentle settling of timber that had sheltered countless souls. This was communion, not between human and animal, not between food and hunger, but between need and offering, two halves of the same quiet truth. We are all waiting to be seen, and we are all capable of seeing. Upstairs, Mrs. Alara stirred in her sleep. Not awake, no, her breathing remained slow, her face peaceful, but aware, in that liminal space between dream and dawn, that her offering had been received. A smile touched her lips. Faint, fleeting, true, she didn't need to know who came, didn't need to see the cat. She only needed to know that the door was open, that the loaf was there, that love had found its way. And that was enough. Downstairs, the cat dreamed deeper. Its paws twitched, chasing not prey, but butterflies in a sun-drenched field. Its tail curled loosely around the loaf, as if anchoring itself to this moment of grace. It didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't care. For now, it was warm. For now, it was full not of food, but of peace. For now, it belonged. And in the world of the weary, for now is everything. You too, dear listener, may rest like this. You don't need to prove your worthiness. You don't need to explain your exhaustion. You don't need to earn this moment of peace. Like the cat, you are allowed to stop, to curl up, to let someone else hold the weight for a while. Imagine the linen cloth draped over you now, soft, warm, smelling faintly of lavender and flower. Feel the counter beneath you, not hard, but supportive, like the earth itself saying, "I've got you." Hear the rain not as noise, but as a chorus singing you into safety. Breathe. Let your muscles soften. Let your thoughts drift like flour in warm air. Let your heart believe, just for tonight, that you too are worthy of this tenderness. Because you are, not for what you've done, not for what you'll do, but for simply being here, tired, trying, true. The cat knows this, the loaf knows this, the rain knows this, and so do you. Rest now, beloved. Let the bakery hold you. Let the night wrap you in its silver hush. Let the warmth of unconditional welcome sink into your bones. You are safe. You are seen. You are home. Moonlight through steamed glass. The rain had softened to a sigh. Not gone, never gone, but gentler now, as if the clouds had remembered their purpose was not to drown, but to nourish. And with that softening, something else returned. Light. Not the sharp, demanding glare of street lamps or headlights, but the oldest light of all, the moon, pale and patient, slipping through a tear in the clouds like a secret finally ready to be told. It fell first on the wet cobblestones of Willow Lane, turning puddles into pools of liquid silver. Then it climbed the bakery's brick wall, tracing the ivy that clung there like memory. Finally, it reached the front window, still fogged from the day's baking, still streaked with rain and flour, and pressed itself against the glass. And there, in that meeting of cool light and warm vapor, something miraculous happened. The steam did not vanish. It did not clear to reveal the world beyond. Instead, it transformed. Moonlight passing through steamed glass does not show things as they are. It shows them as they could be, softened, blurred, bathed in grace. Edges melt, shadows soften, harsh lines dissolve into dream. What was ordinary becomes sacred. What was broken becomes whole, not because it changed, but because the light chose to see it differently. Inside the bakery, this new light spilled across the floor like liquid pearl. It touched the cat's fur, turning it to smoke and silver. It brushed the loaf on the counter, making its linen shroud glow like a halo. It even found its way to the ovens, gilding their iron flanks with a quiet reverence. But most of all, it lingered on the windows themselves. For glass, especially old glass, holds more than reflections. It holds thresholds, and tonight, with moonlight filtering through its misted surface, the window became a mirror, not of faces, but of feelings. If you stood before it now, you would not see your features clearly. You would see an outline, a shape softened by breath and time. And in that blur, you might glimpse something truer than clarity. Your own quiet presence, unburdened by judgment, untouched by expectation. This was the gift of moonlight through steamed glass. It didn't ask you to be perfect. It only asked you to be, and in that being, it offered peace. The cat lifted its head. Not startled, no, its body remained curled around the loaf, but curious. Its eyes, wide and green as river moss, followed the path of the light as it slid down the pane, pooling on the counter like spilled milk. It blinked slowly, then stretched one paw toward the glow, claws sheathed, as if testing the warmth of a dream. It felt no fear, only wonder, because moonlight, unlike daylight, does not expose. It reveals gently. It wraps what it touches in a veil of mercy. Scars become stories. Wrinkles become wisdom. Loneliness becomes solitude, and solitude in the right light becomes sanctuary. The cat understood this in its bones. It had lived by moonlight for seasons, hunting, hiding, healing under its silver gaze. But never before had it felt seen asterisk by it, not as prey, not as pest, but as a soul worthy of witness. It lowered its head again, resting its chin on the linen-draped loaf, and let the light wash over it like a blessing. Upstairs, Mrs. Alara stirred. Not fully awake, her body still cradled in deep sleep, but her spirit brushed against the shift in the air. She knew this light, had known it since childhood, when she'd press her nose to this very window after storms, watching the world reborn in silver. She smiled in her sleep. Because moonlight through steamed glass always came at the right time, not when you called for it, but when you needed it most. And tonight, the bakery needed to remember its own beauty. For weeks, doubt had crept in, quiet, insidious, dressed as practicality. The rent was due. The cafe down the lane offered artisanal sourdough with avocado toast and cold brew. Young people walked past without glancing inside. Even Mrs. Alara had begun to wonder, is this still needed? Am I just clinging to the past? But the moonlight didn't answer with logic. It answered with presence. It showed her bakery not as a business, but as a heartbeat. Not as a shop, but as a sanctuary. And in that light, she saw what numbers could never measure. The warmth that lingered after the last customer left. The quiet dignity of a loaf baked with care. The way strangers became neighbors over shared crumbs. She didn't need to see it clearly to know it was true. Sometimes truth lives in the blur. Downstairs, the oven sensed the change. Bertha exhaled one last puff of warmth, not heat, but breath, sending a wisp of vapor curling toward the window. It met the moonlight halfway, swirling into a tiny galaxy before dissolving into the air. Silas hummed low in his flute, a sound like distant stars singing. They too remembered this light. Back in '52, when the town mourned the loss of the mill workers, families gathered here not for bread, but for silence. They sat by the window, watching the moon through steamed glass, saying nothing, needing nothing but shared space. The ovens held the room warm, the bakery held the grief, and the moon held them all. That night, no one bought a single loaf, but everyone left lighter. Because sometimes the greatest nourishment isn't eaten, it's witnessed. Now, decades later, the same light returned, and with it a quiet knowing this place matters, not because it's profitable, not because it's famous, but because it holds space asterisk for the weary, the lost, the quietly breaking, the softly healing. The moonlight didn't prove it, it simply revealed it. And revelation in the right moment is enough. Inside the bakery, time slowed. The clock above the flour bins stopped ticking, not broken, but resting, as if even time needed to witness this grace. Dust motes hung suspended in the silver beams, glittering like frozen stars. The rain outside fell so softly it sounded like breath, and the window became a portal, not to another world, but to a deeper layer of this one. For those who looked closely, the steamed glass showed not just reflections, but echoes. A young woman, tears streaming, pressing her forehead to the pane after a breakup, finding solace in the warmth within. An old man tracing the shape of a heart in the condensation, remembering his wife, who used to meet him here every Thursday for rye bread and tea. A child drawing smiley faces in the fog with a fingertip, laughing as they vanished like wishes. All of them had stood here, all of them had been held, and the glass remembered, not as data but as devotion. Each fingerprint, each smudge, each breath mark was a prayer pressed into the surface, and the moonlight honored them all, turning them into constellations only the heart could read. You too, dear listener, have stood before such windows, maybe not in a bakery, maybe in a hospital room, a train station, a kitchen at 3 a.m. moments when the world felt too sharp, too loud, too much, and you longed for softness. For a light that didn't demand clarity, but offered compassion. That light is here now. Look, through the steamed glass of your own weariness, the moon shines, not to fix you, not to hurry you, but to say, I see you. And you are enough, exactly as you are, exactly as you rest. Breathe now. Let the silver light fill your lungs. Let it touch the places you've hidden, the shame, the doubt, the quiet ache of trying so hard for so long. The moon doesn't flinch. It doesn't turn away. It simply holds you in its gentle gaze, reminding you that even the darkest night carries light if you're willing to look through softened eyes. Imagine yourself standing before the bakery window now. Your reflection is blurred, just an outline, a shape wrapped in shadow and silver. But within that blur, you feel something shift. Not a change in your circumstances, but in your perception. The weight on your shoulders hasn't vanished, but it feels held. The questions in your mind haven't been answered, but they feel less urgent. The loneliness hasn't disappeared, but it feels less sharp, because you are not alone. The cat sleeps beside the loaf. The ovens dream of wheat fields. Mrs. Alara breathes upstairs. The rain sings to the roof, and the moon watches over you all. This is the quiet miracle of steamed glass. It teaches us that we don't need to be seen clearly to be loved completely. In fact, sometimes clarity is overrated. What if the parts you hide, the messy, uncertain, tired parts, are not flaws to be fixed, but sacred spaces where grace can enter? What if your worth isn't in your productivity, but in your presence? What if you are enough, not when you achieve, but when you simply are? The moonlight doesn't argue, it doesn't convince, it just is. And in its being, it invites you to do the same. Rest now. Let the steam blur your edges. Let the moonlight hold your shape. Let the bakery wrap you in its quiet certainty that you belong here. not because you've earned it, but because you exist. Outside, the clouds shift again. The moon slips behind a veil, but its light lingers, reflected in puddles, caught in droplets on the glass, held in the breath of the sleeping cat. And the bakery remembers. It remembers that light always returns. That clarity is not the goal, compassion is. That sometimes the truest vision comes not through sharp focus, but through softened sight. You don't need to see the whole path, just this step, just this breath, just this moment of being held by silver light and steamed glass. Sleep now, beloved. Let the moon tuck you in. Let the steam wrap you in mystery. Let the bakery whisper what your soul already knows. You are seen, you are safe, you are home, and that is enough. Ah, the night holds its breath. The moon still lingers behind thinning clouds. The cat sleeps, wrapped in silver light. Then deep in the cool, quiet heart of the bakery, the dough waits, not impatiently, not anxiously, but with the deep, wordless trust of something that knows all things rise in their own time. The dough that waited for morning. It sat in the back corner of the walk-in cooler, unseen, unheard, untouched since Mrs. Alara had tucked it away just before closing. A simple ceramic bowl, chipped at the rim, covered with a damp linen cloth weighted down by a smooth river stone, the same one she'd held upstairs, though she didn't know it. Inside, a mass of dough, pale gold, soft as a sigh, dotted with bubbles like tiny promises, rested in the cool, humid dark. To the world outside, it was inert, lifeless, waiting to be used. But inside the bowl, a quiet miracle unfolded. Yeast wild, captured from the orchard behind the shop, fed for decades on rye flour and rainwater, worked its ancient alchemy. Not loudly, not quickly, but steadily, patiently, turning simple elements into something alive. Each bubble that formed was a breath, each slow expansion a song. This dough was not meant for today. It was for tomorrow's sunrise loaf, the one Mrs. Alara would shape at dawn, score with a single slash, and slide into Bertha's warm belly just as the first bird stirred. But tonight, its only task was to be. And in that being, it held a wisdom the world has nearly forgotten. Rest is not idleness. Rest is preparation. The dough did not fret that it wasn't rising fast enough. It did not compare itself to the loaf already baked, already shared. It did not panic that morning felt impossibly far away. It simply trusted the process, because it knew deep in its gluten strands, in the very memory of wheat fields swaying under summer sun, that transformation cannot be rushed. Flavor cannot be forced. Strength cannot be faked. The true rising happens in the dark, in silence, in stillness, and so it waited, not passively, but actively breathing, fermenting, becoming. Outside the cooler, the bakery slept, but inside this small, chilled space, life hummed. The air carried the faintest tang of lactic acid, the signature of slow fermentation, the taste of time honored. The linen cloth stayed damp, not from neglect, but from care. Mrs. Dilara had soaked it in filtered water infused with a pinch of sea salt, knowing moisture would keep the surface supple. Even in her absence, her love lingered. The dough remembered her hands, not rough, not hurried, but steady, reverent, as if needing not just flour, but hope. She defolded it 3 times over 6 hours, each turn a silent vow. I believe in you, I'll wait for you. And now, in the cool dark, it honored that belief by doing what it was made to do, become more than it was. No fanfare, no audience. Just quiet, faithful becoming. Upstairs, Mrs. Alera dreamed, not of sales or rent or competition, but of wheat fields stretching to the horizon, golden under a kind sun. In her dream, she walked barefoot through the stalks, running her fingers over seed heads heavy with promise. She didn't harvest them. Didn't rush, she simply stood among them, breathing in the scent of earth and potential. She woke briefly, just long enough to murmur, soon, before drifting back into sleep. Downstairs, the doe heard, not with ears, but with essence. It knew soon was not a demand, but an invitation. A reminder that timing is sacred. For in the language of bakers and of souls, there is a difference between waiting and wasting time. Waiting is active trust. Wasting time is anxious avoidance. The dough chose waiting. It let the cool air cradle it. Let the stone anchor the cloth. Let the yeast work its quiet magic. And in that surrender, it grew stronger. Because strength isn't forged in fire alone. Sometimes it's woven in the cool, quiet dark, strand by patient strand. The cat, still curled beside the baked loaf, twitched in its sleep. In its dream, it wandered a sunlit field, not hunting, not hiding, but exploring. It paused beside a patch of wild rye, sniffed the air, then lay down in the tall grass, belly to earth, utterly at peace. It didn't know it was dreaming of the doe's origin. But the connection was there, rooted in the same truth. Life thrives when given space, time, and trust. Outside, the rain ceased entirely. Not with a dramatic stop, but with a gradual hush, as if the clouds had finished their lullaby and tiptoed away. The streetlights shone clearer now, their halos sharp against the wet pavement. A single drop fell from the awning clink into the barrel below, sending ripples across the surface like echoes of a promise. Inside the bakery, silence deepened. Not empty silence, full silence. The kind that hums with unseen life. And in the cooler, the dough continued its quiet work. It thought not in words, but in sensations. The cool kiss of ceramic against its sides. The gentle weight of the linen like a mother's hand. The slow pulse of bubbles forming, rising, popping, tiny deaths that made room for new life. It understood what humans so often forget. Growth is not linear. Some hours it seemed to do nothing. Other hours it swelled almost visibly. But every moment mattered, even the still ones. And especially the still ones, for in stillness the structure forms. In darkness the flavor deepens. In waiting the soul prepares. You too, dear listener, are like this dough. Right now, in this very moment, you may feel unseen, unproductive, as if nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, miracles are unfolding. The tears you cried last week, they're softening your heart. The quiet hour you spent staring out the window, it's giving your mind space to heal. The decision you haven't made yet, it's ripening in the cool dark of your intuition. You don't need to force clarity. You don't need to rush resolution. Like the dough, you are exactly where you need to be. Resting, rising, becoming. Breathe now. Imagine yourself in the cooler, not cold, but cool, like a mountain stream. Wrapped in a linen cloth scented with salt and thyme. You waited gently by a stone that says, "Stay. You are safe here." There is no clock in this space, no deadline, no voice whispering, "Hurry up." Only the slow, steady rhythm of your own becoming. Let your muscles soften like relaxed gluten. Let your thoughts drift like bubbles in fermenting dough. Let your spirit trust, deeply, completely, that you are being prepared for something beautiful, even if you can't see it yet. The dough doesn't know it will become bread. It only knows it must stay true to its nature, and that is enough. Because faithfulness, not visibility, is the path to wholeness. Mrs. Alara knew this. That's why she never peeked in the cooler at night, never poked the dough to check. She trusted it to do its work, and in that trust, she honored its dignity. How rarely we offer that to ourselves. We prod our dreams. We dissect our progress. We punish our pauses. But what if instead we covered ourselves with a damp cloth of self-kindness? What if we placed a stone of patience on top and whispered, "Rest, I believe in you"? What if we allowed ourselves to rise in our own time? The dough offers this invitation, not as lesson, but as companion. It sits in the dark, not because it's forgotten, but because it's cherished. Not because it's idle, but because it's essential. And so are you. Even when you feel invisible, even when nothing seems to be happening, even when the world rushes past your quiet corner, you are not behind, you are not broken, you are fermenting. And fermentation cannot be rushed. Outside, the first hint of dawn tinged the eastern sky, pale lavender, barely there. But inside the bakery, night still reigned. The ovens slept. The cat dreamed. The loaf held its warmth. And the dough waited, not with longing, but with peace, because it knew morning would come. New hands would return. Knew it would be shaped, scored, baked, not to prove its worth, but to fulfill its purpose. And until then, it rested, fully, deeply, faithfully. You may do the same. Let go of the need to produce. Let go of the fear of wasting time. Let go of the illusion that stillness is failure. Here in the cool dark of this moment, you are exactly where you need to be, rising in silence, growing in secret, becoming in trust. Sleep now, beloved. Let the dough's quiet rhythm guide your breath. Let the cooler's gentle chill soothe your fevered thoughts. Let the linen of compassion wrap around your weary soul. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared, and that is enough. Ah, the night leans toward dawn, but not yet. The dough still rests in the cool dark. The cat dreams of sunlit fields, and somewhere on a windowsill across town, a single crumb waits to be found. Warmth in every crumb. It was no bigger than a thumbnail, just a single crumb, golden brown, flecked with sea salt, fallen from the heel of yesterday's rye loaf when Mrs. Alara sliced it for Mr. Fenwick's thermos of soup. She hadn't noticed it drop, hadn't swept it up. His had simply turned to stir the broth, her mind on the way his hands had trembled as he held the cup. And so the crumb remained, not on the counter, not on the floor, but on the wide wooden sill of the back window, the one that looked out over the rain-damp garden, where lavender and thyme grew wild between cobblestones. There, caught in a shallow groove worn smooth by decades of elbows leaning in contemplation, the crumb sat, alone, unseen, seemingly insignificant. But crumbs, especially those born of love, are never truly alone, for warmth does not vanish when bread is broken. It lingers, in scent, in memory, in the invisible threads that connect giver to receiver, receiver to stranger, stranger to sky. And this crumb held a story. It remembered the wheat field under summer sun, swaying like a prayer. It remembered the millstone grinding grain into flour, slow and steady. It remembered Mrs. Alara's hands, wrinkled, strong, dusted with rye, as she mixed, kneaded, folded, believing all the while that this loaf would matter to someone. It didn't know it would end up here, a tiny fragment on a windowsill, but it didn't mind, because crumbs understand something whole loaves sometimes forget. You don't need to be complete to be meaningful. You only need to be offered. And so it waited, not for glory, not for recognition, but for purpose. Outside, the world stirred, not with noise, with life. A sparrow, feathers fluffed against the lingering chill, hopped along the garden fence, peering into puddles for insects. It was young, this was its first winter, and hunger gnawed at its belly like a constant whisper. It had tried the bird feeder down the lane, but the larger birds had chased it away. It had pecked at frozen berries, but they offered little sustenance. Now, weak-winged and weary, it landed on the bakery's back gate. Then there on the windowsill, glowing faintly in the pre-dawn light, was the crumb. It didn't look like much, just a speck of brown against weathered wood. But to the sparrow, it was salvation. It fluttered closer, head cocked, eyes bright with cautious hope, sniffed the air. It detected no threat, only the faint, comforting scent of rye and thyme. One hop onto the sill, another, then, gently, it pecked. The crumb broke apart easily, not stale, but softened by the humid night, infused with residual warmth from the bakery's walls. The sparrow ate slowly, savoring each morsel, as if sensing this was more than food. It was care. It was chance. It was a thread of kindness spun across the dark. And as it ate, something shifted, not just in its belly, but in its spirit. The fear that had tightened its chest since autumn began loosened just a fraction. The belief that the world was harsh and indifferent softened, because here, on this quiet windowsill, someone or something had left a gift. No note, no fanfare, just a crumb. But that crumb said everything. You are seen. You matter, there is enough. When the sparrow finished, it didn't fly away immediately. It sat for a long moment, preening its feathers, watching its breath curl in the cool air. Then, with a soft chirp, more sigh than song, it took flight, circling once over the bakery before vanishing into the lavender mist. It didn't know whose window this was, didn't know Mrs. Elara's name, but it carried her kindness in its bones, and that kindness would ripple. Later that morning, the sparrow would land on the windowsill of a lonely widow 3 streets over, singing a melody so sweet it would make her pause mid-sip of tea, tears welling in eyes that hadn't cried in years. She'd open her window, scatter seeds on the ledge, and whisper, "Thank you." That simple act, born of a crumb, would begin a daily ritual. And that ritual would ease her grief, stitch her back into the fabric of the neighborhood, remind her that she too could give. All from a single crumb. Inside the bakery, the crumb's absence went unnoticed. Mrs. Elara wouldn't miss it, wouldn't even remember it existed. But that didn't diminish its worth, because true generosity isn't measured by what the giver knows, but by what the receiver feels. Yen the sparrow had felt seen asterisk. That is the quiet magic of crumbs. They carry the essence of the whole, not the shape, but the soul. Every loaf Mrs. Elara baked held this truth. She never served perfection. Her crusts sometimes cracked. Her buns occasionally spread too wide. But every bite carried intention, care folded into flour, hope kneaded into dough. And when those loaves were shared, when they were broken, passed, crumbled, their warmth didn't disappear. It multiplied. A slice given to a student studying through the night became fuel for a future doctor. Zahil tossed to a stray dog became the reason it lingered near the bakery, eventually finding a home with the florist next door. A bag of day-olds donated to the shelter became the first meal a recovering addict ate without shame. None of these moments were grand. None were recorded, but they mattered deeply, because kindness doesn't need an audience to be real. It only needs a heart willing to offer and another willing to receive. You too, dear listener, have been a crumb, maybe not literally, but in spirit. That text you sent just to say, thinking of you. That seat you gave up on the bus. That silent prayer you whispered for someone hurting. That tear you shed for a world you couldn't fix. Small, yes. Insignificant, never, because warmth lives in the details. In the space between I'm fine and the hand that squeezes yours anyway. In the pause before how are you becomes no, really, how are you? In the crumb left on the sill for a creature you'll never meet. And you too have been nourished by crumbs. The barista who remembered your order on your worst day. The stranger who held the door when your arms were full. The old song that played at just the right moment, carrying you back to a time when you felt loved. These are not accidents. They are echoes of care, sent out long ago, returning to you when you needed them most. The bakery understands this. That's why Mrs. Elara never sweeps too thoroughly, why she leaves the heels of loaves for the birds, why she wraps extra rolls in paper and tucks them into the bench by the park. She knows wholeness is overrated. What matters is connection, and connection thrives in fragments. Look now at the counter where the last loaf still rests beside the sleeping cat. See the tiny flakes of crust that have fallen onto the linen cloth. Each one holds the memory of fire, of yeast, of human hands. If you were to pick one up and place it on your tongue, you wouldn't taste just bread. You'd taste patience. You'd taste hope. You'd taste the quiet certainty that someone believed the world was worth feeding. That is the power of a crumb, not in its size, but in its story. Breathe now. Imagine yourself holding a single crumb in your palm, warm, fragrant, impossibly light. Feel its weight, not heavy, but present. Know that you, too, are a crumb in someone else's story. Your smile this morning, it lifted a coworker's spirits. Your silence during a friend's rant, it gave them space to heal. Your decision to rest tonight, it honors the body that carries you through this world. You don't need to do more to matter. You already do. Simply by being kind. Simply by showing up. Simply by leaving warmth wherever you go, even in fragments. The night deepens toward dawn. The ovens dream of tomorrow's bake. The dough ferments in faithful silence. The cat stirs, stretches, then nestles deeper into the loaf's warmth. And outside, the sparrow sings again, faint, far away, a melody woven from rye and rain and rescue. Mrs. Alara will never know, but the universe does, and that is enough. Rest now, beloved. Let the truth of the crumb sink into your bones. You are small. You are fleeting. You are enough. Your kindness echoes. Your presence matters. Your warmth remains, even in fragments, especially in fragments. Sleeping under the scent of yeast and rain, the night did not end with a fanfare. It did not snap shut like a book or fade like a screen. It simply softened, like dough relaxing under a linen cloth, like breath slowing after a long-held sigh. Like the moment you realize you've been safe all along. And in that softening, everything in the bakery settled, not into sleep, but into belonging. The scent that filled the air now was not just yeast or rain, but their union. The earthy tang of fermentation meeting the clean kiss of falling water, weaving a perfume so ancient, so tender, it could only be called *home. It rose from the cooling ovens, drifted from the dough in the cooler, clung to the flour-dusted windows, and wrapped around the last loaf like a promise kept. This was the aroma of care made visible, not in grand gestures, but in daily faithfulness, in hands that needed when tired. In doors left open when no one was watching, in loaves baked not for profit, but for presence. And tonight, that care had rippled outward, touching a cat, a stranger, a sparrow, a widow 3 streets over, until the whole neighborhood breathed a little easier. But now, as the first blush of dawn tinged the eastern sky with lavender and pearl, the bakery turned inward once more, not to close itself off, but to gather its own soul, to rest, because even places built to give must learn to receive. Mrs. Alara stirred upstairs, not waking, not yet, but drifting toward the surface of sleep like a leaf rising through still water. Her dreams had been kind, wheat fields under summer sun, her mother's hands shaping buns, the sound of laughter in the shop on a busy Saturday morning. No worries about rent, no fear of obsolescence, just the quiet joy of being exactly where she was meant to be. She smiled in her sleep, then sighed, a long, slow release of breath that carried every unspoken burden out into the night. Downstairs, the house felt it. The floorboards exhaled. As the ovens hummed a final note, the windows cleared just enough to let the new light in, and the loaf on the counter, it seemed to glow, not with heat but with completion. Its purpose had been fulfilled, not because it was eaten, but because it was offered. Because it created a space where a weary soul could rest. That was enough, more than enough. Beside it, the cat stretched, slow, luxurious, utterly unafraid. Its green eyes opened, blinked once at the softening dark, then closed again. It didn't leave, not yet. It knew dawn would come soon enough, with its demands and dangers. But for now, it stayed, curled among crumbs, wrapped in warmth, held by silence. It had found what it didn't know it was seeking, not food, but fellowship, not shelter, but sanctuary. And in that finding, it remembered its own worth, not as a mouser or stray, but as a being deserving of softness, simply because it existed. Outside, the rain had fully ceased. Puddles mirrored the fading stars. The streetlights dimmed, sensing the approach of day. With a single leaf, crimson and late to fall, spun lazily in a gutter stream before settling against the bakery's foundation. Another small thing finding its place. Inside, time stretched like warm taffy. The clock above the flour bins began to tick again, not hurried, but steady, as if remembering its rhythm. As the dust motes resumed their slow dance in the lamplight, even the broom in the corner leaned back against the wall with a soft creak, as though satisfied with the night's work, for the work had been done. It's not the work of baking or selling or sweeping, but the deeper work, holding space, offering warmth, letting love flow without expectation. And in that work, everyone had been fed. You too, dear listener, have been fed tonight, not with bread, but with belonging. As you've listened to the rain tap on flour-dusted windows, as you've curled beside the last loaf, as you've dreamed with ovens and sparrows and dough in the cool dark, something in you has softened. It's the armor you wear against the world, the worry, the rush, the need to prove yourself, has loosened just a fraction. And in that loosening, you've remembered, you don't need to earn rest. You don't need to justify your existence. You don't need to be whole to be worthy. You are already held by the same forces that cradle the cat, the loaf, the crumb, by the quiet magic of ordinary kindness, by the patient rhythm of yeast and rain, by the unseen hands that leave doors open in a world that often slams them shut. Breathe now. Let the scent of yeast and rain fill your lungs, not as memory, but as present truth. Feel the weight of the night around you, not as pressure, but as protection. Know that you, too, are sleeping under this scent, in this space, in this story, because you belong here. Not as guest, not as observer, but as kin. The bakery doesn't ask who you are or what you've done. It simply offers warmth and trusts you to take what you need. A moment of peace, a reminder of your worth, a crumb of hope, and that is enough. Look around you now in your mind's eye. See the soft glow of the amber bulb above the counter. Hear the distant purr of the cat, steady as a heartbeat. Feel the residual warmth from Bertha and Sela's wrapping around you like invisible arms. This is not fantasy. This is invitation. An invitation to carry this peace with you, to remember in the noise of tomorrow that stillness exists, that kindness persists, that you are never truly alone. For as long as there are bakeries like this, small, quiet, faithful, there will always be a place for the weary to rest. And you can build that place wherever you go, in the way you listen without fixing, in the way you leave space for others to simply be, in the way you offer your own crumbs, your time, your attention, your quiet presence without needing thanks. That is how the world heals. Not in revolutions, but in repetitions. Not in grand acts, but in daily offerings. Mrs. Alara knew this. The ovens knew this. Even the rain knew this. And now you know it too. Outside, the sky lightened further. Not with the harsh glare of noon, but with the gentle blush of dawn. Rose gold bleeding into pearl, clouds edged in silver. The first bird sang, not loud, but clear, a single note that hung in the air like a question answered. Inside, the bakery prepared to wake, but not with urgency. With grace, the ovens would warm slowly, honoring the dough's long rest. The flour bins would be refilled, each scoop a silent vow. The door would open, not to rush the world in, but to welcome it home. And the last loaf, it would remain until needed. Not as obligation, but as offering. Because love doesn't disappear when the night ends. It simply changes form. Now, as your own night draws to a close, as your eyelids grow heavy, your breath deepens, your thoughts drift like flour in warm air, I offer you this final truth: you are enough. Not because of what you've done, not because of what you'll do, but because you are here, tired, trying, true, and that is sacred. So rest now, beloved. Let the scent of yeast and rain tuck you in. Let the bakery hold you in its quiet certainty. Let the night release you gently into dreams where you are always seen, always safe, always home. The rain has fallen, the bread has risen, the cat has slept, and you may rest too, for you too are part of this story, part of this warmth. A part of this love. Sleep deeply, wake gently, and carry this peace with you like a crumb in your pocket, like a loaf in your heart, like moonlight through steamed glass. You are held, you are whole, you are home, always.